The room froze when the new black teacher walked in. Yet before she even spoke, someone had scrawled a slur across her board in bold, dripping letters. Phones rose, laughter erupted, and the students waited for her to crack. But instead of breaking, she did something no one saw coming, something that silenced the room in 60 seconds. What did she do? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The hallways of Crestwood High gleamed with polished tiles, its trophy cases lined with decades of championships and accolades. The banners spoke of excellence, but the air inside the building carried a sharper edge, an unspoken code of who belonged and who didn't. As the morning bell rang, Miss Alana Brooks adjusted her blazer, straightened her lesson plans under her arm, and took her first steps toward room 2014, the classroom that would define her new beginning. Alana had envisioned this moment countless times. In her mind, she would walk in to respectful silence, eager faces ready to meet their new teacher. She had pictured rows of bright notebooks, pens poised, and perhaps even a few smiles from students, curious about her teaching style. Instead, as she reached the door, the muffled sound of laughter and chatter spilled out, loud and unruly, as if no teacher had ever held authority in that space. She paused, drew in a breath, and turned the knob. The room fell silent for only a fraction of a second when she entered. Dozens of eyes snapped toward her, scanning her appearance in unison. Alana, young but confident, with her natural curls pulled neatly back and her heels clicking softly against the linoleum, looked like no teacher they had ever seen at Crestwood. Whispers slithered through the rows. A boy in the back elbowed his friend, muttering under his breath. A girl smirked, flipping her glossy hair, her eyes narrowing as if to challenge Alana's presence. Alana placed her folder on the desk at the front, taking her time, refusing to be rushed by the expectant hush. She wrote her name across the whiteboard in bold, steady letters, Ms. Brooks. The marker squeaked with each stroke, but the sound was drowned out by suppressed snickers and the buzzing energy of teenagers waiting to see how far they could push. She turned to face them, posture tall, eyes scanning the room, refusing to break her calm. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I'm Miss Brooks, and this year we're going to do something different in this classroom. We're going to learn together, and we're going to respect each other." The words hung in the air, but the silence that followed wasn't respect. It was the silence of a crowd waiting for a performance to begin. One boy let out an exaggerated cough that sounded suspiciously like a racial slur. A ripple of laughter moved across the room. Alana heard it, sharp and undeniable, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes moved toward the boy, steady but not confrontational, holding his gaze long enough for him to look away. Still, the murmurs grew louder. A few students leaned across their desks, whispering, "She won't last long," as though the walls themselves had heard this prophecy before. Their arrogance was practiced, honed in years of testing boundaries with substitutes, new teachers, or anyone who didn't match the Crestwood mold. Alana walked slowly between the rows, her heels echoing in deliberate rhythm. She made a point of standing near the smirking students, letting them feel the weight of her presence. Some shifted uncomfortably, others doubled down on their defiance. One girl held her phone in her lap, already recording. Alana's instincts sharpened. She knew the look of a setup. Students waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate her, to capture her reaction on camera and spin it into viral mockery. Her chest tightened, but her expression never cracked. She reached the center of the room, hands folded in front of her, and asked, "Before we begin, does anyone have any questions for me?" The silence that followed was deceptive. For a moment, it seemed like her calm had worked, like she had reclaimed the atmosphere. Then, suddenly, it happened. A loud popping sound echoed through the room, followed by a spray of white dust. The ceiling tile above her had been tampered with, stuffed with chalk dust that now rained down on her blazer and hair. Students erupted in laughter. Phones shot into the air to capture every angle, and the classroom shook with chaos. Alana froze. Dust clung to her curls, her shoulders, the front of her blazer. The humiliation was raw, stinging deeper than the chalk could ever cut. She could hear the voices rising around her. "She's done already. Welcome to Crestwood, Miss Brooks. She looks like a ghost." But Alana didn't move. She stood in the center of the storm, her hands still clasped in front of her, her jaw tightening only slightly. Slowly, she lifted her chin, her eyes sweeping across the room. The students kept laughing, But cracks began to form in their bravado. Some looked away, uncomfortable with the way she refused to give them the reaction they wanted. The camera phones zoomed in closer, recording every second. This was the moment they believed they had broken her. The clip would spread across Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. New teacher destroyed on day one. But as the chalk dust settled onto the floor, Alana's face shifted. Her eyes hardened. Her mouth set into a line not of defeat, but of determination. She took a single step forward, her presence slicing through the chaos. The laughter wavered, dipping for a brief moment before surging again, desperate to cover its own fear. The room buzzed with the thrill of the prank, but beneath it, an uneasy tension crept in. Students sensed it, though they didn't want to admit it. She wasn't reacting like they had hoped. Something about the way she stood there, unshaken, unsettled their performance. Still, the recording continued. Phones angled, capturing her every move. One student whispered, "She's about to snap." Another replied, "Nah, she's gonna cry. Watch." Yet Alana's voice, when it finally cut through the noise, wasn't shaky or furious. It was calm, too calm. And just as she parted her lips to speak, the laughter swelled once more, louder, harsher, desperate to drown her out. The camera freezes on Alana's determined face as the students burst into laughter. What will she do next? She leaned forward against the porcelain sink, exhaling slowly. This was not how the first day was supposed to feel. Not after everything she had endured to get here. Not after the endless nights of studying, the long commute to grad school, the student teaching assignments where she had poured her soul into proving she could lead a classroom. Crestwood High was supposed to be the reward. The memory of the day she got the acceptance call returned to her like a cruel contrast. She had been sitting at her mother's kitchen table in their small Baltimore row house, her laptop open, a cup of lukewarm coffee beside her. The email had come with the school's polished crest at the top. "We are pleased to offer you the position of English teacher at Crestwood High School." Her mother had cried. Her younger brother had clapped his hands together in disbelief. "Prestigious," her mother kept repeating, wiping her eyes with a dish towel. "Baby, you're going to one of the best schools in the state. You're breaking every ceiling." And Alana had believed it. For a girl raised in a neighborhood where teachers rotated in and out every semester, where textbooks were taped together, and desks bore the carvings of generations of restless students, Crestwood felt like a miracle. The glossy hallways, the modern labs, the funding, all of it signaled possibility. But possibility had strings. She remembered the interview vividly, the way Principal Harris had folded his hands neatly across his desk as he scanned her resume. He had nodded at her degrees, praised her for her academic record, even tilted his head slightly when she explained her thesis on literacy gaps in underfunded communities. She had smiled politely, though she didn't fully understand. "I believe good teaching fits anywhere, sir." Students respond to authenticity. Harris's expression hadn't changed. "Perhaps, but authenticity has to blend. If you want longevity here, you'll need to be twice as prepared, twice as polished, and ready to prove yourself more than anyone else." At the time, she'd brushed it off as the kind of high-expectation talk any principal might give. She had nodded eagerly, assuring him she was ready for the challenge. In her heart, she had even felt proud, ready to outwork, outshine, But sitting in the restroom now, chalk dust staining the lapel of her jacket, the words replayed differently. Twice as prepared, twice as polished. It no longer sounded like motivation. It sounded like a warning. She closed her eyes and remembered the night before her first day, carefully selecting her outfit, pressing her clothes, reviewing her lesson plan 3 times over. She had stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, whispering to herself, "You belong here." But the truth had already begun to whisper back. Belonging at Crestwood was a currency she hadn't been given. The bell rang faintly in the distance, signaling the next period. Alana splashed water on her face and straightened her shoulders. She wouldn't let the prank define her. Not today, not ever. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and no amount of determination could erase the subtle shift in how she now saw the school. Later that afternoon, as she sat in the staff lounge for the first time, the divide grew even clearer. Conversations around her swirled with a rhythm she couldn't quite step into. Teachers laughed about vacations to the Hamptons, compared their children's private soccer clubs, and exchanged inside jokes that stretched back years. Alana sat at the edge of the table, smiling politely, waiting for an opening. None came. Finally, a middle-aged teacher named Mrs. Carmichael turned to her. "So, Ms. Brooks," she said, her smile polite but distant. "Where are you from?" "Baltimore," Alana answered, straightening a little. Mrs. Carmichael's eyebrows lifted. "Ugh, that must be quite different from here." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't neutral either. Around the table, a few nods passed between colleagues, subtle acknowledgments of an unspoken hierarchy. Alana sipped her water, offering a small smile. "Yes, it's different, but I think students everywhere want the same thing. Someone who believes in them." The table fell silent for a moment, before conversation shifted back to someone's new summer home. Alana sat quietly, a small knot forming in her stomach. This was the trap no one had warned her about directly, though it had been hinted at in every sideways glance, every coded phrase. Crestwood prided itself on being inclusive, but beneath the banners of diversity and excellence lay a current of exclusion. Belonging wasn't granted through merit. It was decided by whether you matched their unspoken mold. As the days of orientation turned into the first week, Alana felt the gap widen. Parents eyed her cautiously during meet and greets, some smiling too politely, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Students tested her relentlessly, pushing limits in ways they didn't with other teachers, and colleagues, though never outright hostile, kept her at arm's length. One evening, she sat at her desk long after the building had emptied, staring out the window as the sun set over Crestwood's pristine football field. She thought of her mother's words, the pride in her voice. "You're breaking every ceiling." Alana whispered to the empty room. "But what if I've stepped into a cage instead?" Her phone buzzed then, a new email notification. She opened it, scanning the words quickly. It was from Principal Harris. The subject line read, "First impression." Her pulse quickened. She read, "Miss Brooks, I trust you're settling in. I want to remind you that Crestwood maintains very high standards. Some of the students have voiced concerns about your teaching style being a bit different. You'll need to work twice as hard to earn their respect. Remember, you'll need to prove yourself more than anyone else." The words blurred for a moment, as Alana's chest tightened. She stared at the screen, the trap closing around her, each phrase confirming what she already feared. Just when Alana feels she finally made it, the principal's cold words echo. "You'll need to prove yourself more than anyone else." The morning after Harris's email, Alana arrived earlier than usual, the sky still the muted gray of pre-dawn. She unlocked room 2114 and stood in the doorway for a beat, as if gauging whether the air itself would allow her to breathe differently today. The whiteboard was clean. The desk sat in tidy rows. Her lesson plan, comparative analysis of character voice, waited on the lectern, printed and clipped. She whispered, not to the room but to the fear in her chest, "We're going to be fine." By second period, the school had shaken off dawn and slipped back into its polished rhythm. Shoes skittered along linoleum, laughter ricocheted off lockers, and Crestwood's unspoken rules, part courtesy, part theater, snapped into place. When her juniors filed in, the hum felt controlled. Savannah Blake set her designer tote down, without a glance. Connor Pierce tossed his lacrosse stick under his desk, a tall boy in a varsity jacket, the one who never wrote his name on warm-ups yet always smirked when called out, stretched like a cat, settling in. Phones slid face down, not away. "Good morning," Alana said, writing the day's objective on the board. "Today we're going to explore how voice reveals power, how what's said and what's unsaid shapes a story." A few chuckles floated up, not laughter, a testing of the perimeter. The tech in the room worked on a timer. The smartboard came alive each block when the school's system automatically recognized class start. At exactly 9:02, it pinged and displayed her computer's desk. For a heartbeat, all looked normal. Then the wallpaper flickered. Alana froze. The Crestwood crest dissolved into a new background, a doctored image labeled, "Ms. Brooks Class Remedial English for Real-World Readiness." Beneath it, in smaller text, "Attendance optional if you're already fluent." The font was playful. The message wasn't. In the bottom corner, an animated GIF looped of a cartoonish teacher tapping a ruler, the words "angry when challenged" flashing every 3 seconds. A ripple of sound moved through the room. Oohs, snickers, a few outright laughs. Phones lifted before she could reach the keyboard. Silence. A performance of innocence. Eyes looked everywhere but at her. The tall boy pretended to pick lint from his sleeve. Savannah inspected her lip gloss. Someone coughed the word "extra" and disguised it as a tick. Alana clicked to settings. Her cursor jerked, then froze. A bloom of new windows unfurled like a magician's scarf. A fake class website. A poll titled, "How long till Miss B quits?" with options ranging from 1 week to already done. And a QR code projected huge in the center. A whisper skated across the room. "Scan it." Alana turned to face them. "Close your phones," she said. "We're not doing this." Connor, without looking up, murmured, "We're just exploring voice, right?" The emphasis placed the word in quotes. A laugh snapped open behind him. She recognized the strategy. Keep it coded. Keep it deniable. Nothing overt. Nothing bold enough to flag. But precise enough to sting. She thought of Harris's email twice as prepared, twice as polished, and felt a dull heat rise at the base of her neck. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "put your phone away." His eyes flicked up lazy. "Sorry, Miss Brooks. Didn't realize you were talking to me." Then to no one, and everyone. Hard to tell sometimes. Savannah's voice, sweet as frosting, slid in. "We just want to get on the same page, Miss Brooks. Like, what's your vibe? Are you chill or strict?" She let strict hang until it meant something else. Alana moved to the smartboard and pulled the HDMI cable. The projection blinked out. "Paper, please," she said. "Text only." Everyone underlined power words. A few complied, almost relieved. Others shifted, bored now that the performance had been interrupted. The tall boy's grin edged wider. He tapped his desk 3 times. A cue and a sound pulsed from the back row. A soft 8-bit beat. Loop. Then a voiceover pitched low like a parody of a movie trailer. Spilled into the room from somewhere unseen. In a world where diversity hires try their best. Laughter broke open. Quick and cruel. Alana's stomach tightened. She scanned the room. The voice was coming from a portable speaker tucked into a backpack, the zipper strategically open. She walked toward the back, eyes on the zipper, when Savannah's hand shot up. "Excuse me," Savannah said. Innocence lacquered thick. "Can I go to the counselor?" "This is a lot of what?" Alana asked. Savannah tilted her head. "Just energy. No offense." The phrase "no offense" hung like perfume. Sugary. Suffocating. Flammable. "Sit tight," Alana said. She reached the backpack, flipped the zipper, and clicked the speaker off. For a second the room held its breath. Then it exhaled in groans, whispers, the scrape of chairs, tiny rebellions knitting themselves back together. "Open your packets," Alana said. "Start with the first passage. Let's mark how the writer signals who's in control." A hand at the front. Ethan Lowell. Quiet, relentless, with tech raised halfway, then fell. He had the look of someone caught between currents. "Ms. Brooks?" His voice was thin. "Do you want me to print new slides? If your files got messed with." She met his eyes. "Thank you, Ethan. We're okay." But they weren't. On the far wall, a motion-activated camera, a student project for the media arts class that was supposedly turned off, blinked a tiny red dot. 10 minutes into the close reading, a knock sounded at the door. Alana opened it to find a delivery bag perched on the floor, glossy logo bright. The hallway was empty. A sticker on the bag read, "Order for Miss B's special welcome." Heat prickled her scalp. She knew before she opened it what she would find. But the knowing didn't dull the humiliation. Inside sat a box of fried chicken and a wedge of watermelon, deliberately arranged like a photograph. Tucked under the lid, a receipt printed with a custom note. "Hope this feels like home." The class didn't gasp. They laughed. Not a burst, something worse. The broken-up staccato of kids delighted with how far they'd pushed. Savannah covered her mouth with her fingers, eyes shining. Connor whispered, "That's so wrong," and yet kept grinning. The tall boy leaned back as if he were admiring a mural. Alana swallowed. "Whoever ordered this," she said, "needs to know how small it makes them." "Maybe it's a compliment," someone offered, deliberately naive. "A tradition," another chimed in. "Shut it down," she said to herself, and to the room. She lifted the bag, carried it to the back counter, and placed it down with more care than it deserved. Her hands trembled. She pressed her palms flat against the laminate, until the tremor receded. "Miss Brooks," a voice near the window said. Tentative. A girl with ink-dark hair, Mara Ellison, kept her eyes on her worksheet. "Do you want me to throw it away?" "Leave it," Alana said softly. "We're working." She returned to the front and doubled down on the text. "Notice how the author avoids naming the bully. Power hides in what goes unspoken," she said, and heard her own words turn blade sharp. She asked questions, waited 2 beats, then called on the ones who avoided her eyes. Slowly the room's rhythm shifted from spectacle to analysis, however grudgingly. For a brief, beautiful stretch, it felt like teaching. A line in the passage, a character refusing to flinch under scrutiny, landed exactly as she'd hoped. Mara said, "It's like the narrator refuses to give the bully a stage," and the sentence steadied the room, if only for a page. Then, before the bell, the smartboard, still unplugged, lit up again, stealing power from some hidden connection. A video filled the screen. It was her, mid-reach into the delivery bag, paused with the box in her hands. A caption overlaid in block letters, "Welcome party." Her face Lex caught, not in anger but in the split-second recognition that she was being watched. "Turn that off," Alana said, but the remote didn't respond. The video played, cut with ruthless precision. The bag, the chicken, the watermelon, her face, a voice masked, synthetic, narrated. In remedial English, cultural relevance is served fresh. Laughter detonated. Phones reappeared like a field of mirrors. "Enough," Alana said, louder now. "Put them away." "Public space," the tall boy murmured, not looking at her. "We're allowed to record." "You're violating school policy," she said, "and basic decency." "Policy's flexible," Savannah added, the silk gone from her voice. "If it's news." The bell rang, a mercy and a curse. They spilled out into the hall like confetti shot from a cannon. Voices already recounting, rating, retelling. The door closed and the room, finally, was quiet. Alana locked it, then gently, slowly, lowered herself into the desk chair. She stared at the plastic bag on the back counter. She didn't cry. Her phone buzzed itself off the edge of the desk. She caught it mid-fall. Notifications swarmed. Tags and stories she wasn't following. Mentions from accounts with Crestwood's colors in their avatars. A TikTok sped past her screen. New English teachers welcome LOL. Cut to a soundtrack of canned laughter. The comments split like a mouth yawning open. Who ordered the lunch though? Why so pressed? Isn't she supposed to handle culture? Another diversity win. She didn't finish reading. Instead, she opened her laptop to document timestamps, details, the sequence of events. When she looked up, Mara was at the door, hovering. "Miss Brooks?" Mara asked. "Do you have a second?" Alana nodded. Mara stepped inside and closed the door behind her with a guilty glance into the hallway. "I didn't laugh," she said quickly, as if confession could be an umbrella. "I mean, I did at first because everyone was. And then, I felt sick." Alana's voice softened. "Thank you for telling me." Mara fumbled with her sleeve. "They used AirDrop to push the background to your desktop. Ethan set up the poll. Savannah paid for the delivery, but she said it was a joke. And the tall guy, he got the speaker. He's the one who got the media arts camera unlocked. He knows someone." "Knows who?" Alana asked. Mara hesitated. "A senior who works with the AV club. And a teacher. I don't know which. They said a friend could keep the camera on if it was for student news." Alana felt the floor shift under her. "Did you hear a name?" Mara looked at the window, then back. "Mr. Ralston. The media arts teacher. He laughed when they told him the idea in the hall. Said, 'Just don't get me in it.'" Alana wrote the name down, her hand oddly steady. "Thank you, Mara. I'm glad you came." Mara blinked fast. "I'm scared they'll find out I told you." "They won't hear it from me," Alana said. "Go to class. I'll handle the rest." When Mara left, Alana allowed herself one breath that sounded like a crack becoming a line. She picked up the delivery bag, sealed it tight, and carried it to the custodian bin in the corridor. On her way back, a cluster of teachers passed, conversations snapping shut as they saw her. Miss Carmichael offered a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You okay, dear?" Mrs. Carmichael asked. Words sugar-dusted and useless. "Handling it," Alana said. In the lounge, two coaches hunched over a phone. One whispered, "Did you see the cut where she," and broke off when Alana appeared. He cleared his throat. "Tough morning?" "Productive," she said, and left before they could answer. By lunch, the video had multiplied into edits. Slow-motion captures of her opening the bag, reaction shots stolen from other moments, captions that rewrote the scene until it wasn't a humiliation inflicted but a joke she should have taken. The school's unofficial gossip account posted a poll. Was it harmless fun? The yes votes flooded. Alana walked to Leclerc's office and paused outside. She could hear voices. Vice Principal Leclerc's clipped Principal Harris's measured, and a third, silkier, Mr. Ralston. She knocked. The conversation inside didn't stop. It's thin. Come in, LeClaire said. They looked up as she entered. Harris kept his expression neutral. LeClaire gestured to the chair. Ralston stared at a spot just over her shoulder, as if sunlight there required urgent study. We saw a video, LeClaire said. We need to discuss classroom management. Classroom management? Alana echoed. I had an unauthorized camera recording my students. I had a racist delivery placed at my door. I had my smartboard hijacked. Harris steepled his fingers. We take all concerns seriously. At the same time, we're hearing that students felt targeted by your tone. My tone? She asked quietly. Ralston's voice floated in. Breezy. It's just that sometimes a lighter touch de-escalates things, Ms. Brooks. Kids prank. Social media amplifies. Best to show you're a good sport. A teacher facilitated the recording, Alana said, eyes on him. Did you authorize the camera in my room? Ralston shrugged. The cameras are for student journalism projects. They're supposed to be off outside certain hours. If a student misunderstood, I'll clarify. Harris's gaze slid to Alana's file on the desk. We're in a sensitive place. Parents watch. Donors watch. You'll need to prove yourself more than anyone else. The words landed like an echo she hadn't asked to hear. Alana stood. I'll document everything, she said. And I'll keep teaching. Outside, in the corridor, her phone buzzed again. Different this time. A tone she'd silenced weeks ago, but forgot to remove for one app. An invitation to a private group chat lit the screen. Crestwood's staff loop. She didn't remember joining it. Beneath it, a preview of the latest message bloomed. A still from the video, her paused with the delivery bag, and 3 crying laughing emojis stacked like a verdict. She tapped the notification. The chat opened to a thread of comments running hot and fast. Some were neutral, some performatively concerned, and then a line from a name she recognized, bright and unmistakable. Y'all. She really brought it on herself. The profile icon was Mrs. Carmichael's. The viral clip had reached the staff group chats. Alana stared at the screen, pulse drumming in her ears, as a new bubble popped up. Harris typing. Would they defend her or join the mockery? The email thread hadn't faded from Alana's mind when she stepped into the staff conference room 2 days later. The long mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its polished surface reflecting coffee cups, binders, and laptops. Around it, the faculty gathered in clusters, their conversations laced with the casual familiarity of people who had known each other for years. She hovered by the doorway for a second, her hands tightening around her notepad, before she took the empty chair near the end. Conversations quieted only slightly when she sat down. A few glanced at her, polite smiles offered without warmth. Then the hum resumed, as if she had simply taken a seat in a play already mid-scene. Principal Harris stood at the head of the table, clearing his throat. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for your flexibility with the start of the semester. We've had some interesting moments already. His eyes flicked briefly toward Alana, then away. The room chuckled softly, as though they were all in on the same joke. Alana's throat tightened, but she sat straighter. Mr. Ralston, the media arts teacher Mara had mentioned, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Kids these days, he said lightly. Everything's a performance. Hard to keep up unless you've got the right tone. His glance skimmed over her like a dart. Several teachers laughed. The sound too quick, too rehearsed. Alana steadied her breath. Students test boundaries, she said, keeping her tone even. But our responsibility is to hold the line. Mrs. Carmichael tilted her head, smiling as though she were offering advice to a child. Of course, dear. But sometimes it's not just about holding the line. It's about knowing how to lighten up, you know? Show them you can take a joke. Lighten up. The words pressed down on her chest like a weight. She had been carrying the delivery bag, the laughter, the emails, and now this. Some jokes aren't harmless, she replied. Some are targeted, and they hurt. The room fell into a short, uncomfortable silence. Then a senior history teacher, Mr. Landry, chuckled. Targeted? Oh, come on. Kids don't think that deeply. They're just seeing how far they can go. If you act like it's serious, they'll think it is. His tone wasn't cruel, but it was dismissive, and the dismissal cut sharper than open mockery. Alana felt the heat rising in her cheeks but forced herself to stay composed. Principal Harris interjected, smoothing over the tension. We all have our teaching styles, but we also need to remember Crestwood's culture. Parents expect a certain balance. Firmness, yes, but warmth too. There it was again. The word culture, wielded like a velvet-edged knife. Alana thought of her students' laughter, of the fake pull, of the food bag designed to reduce her to a caricature. She thought of Mara's trembling voice, confessing in secret. Warmth hadn't protected her then. But here in this room, it seemed to be the shield her colleagues were demanding she wear. I am warm, she said quietly. But I also need to be respected. That's non-negotiable. A murmur circled the table, some approving, others skeptical. Mr. Ralston leaned forward, his smile thin. Respect is earned, Miss Brooks. And sometimes, it's earned by adapting. Students don't always respond well to a tone that feels too sharp, too urban. The word landed heavy, deliberate, urban. A word dressed up as neutral, but meant to cut. The air seemed to shift. Alana's pen dug into her notepad, the ink pooling. She wanted to speak, to push back, but she could feel the eyes on her, waiting, measuring. If she bristled, she would confirm their whisper. If she stayed silent, she would swallow another piece of herself. She forced herself to meet Ralston's gaze. What they respond to is consistency, she said. Steady. And fairness. Fairness, Mrs. Carmichael echoed with a small laugh. Sometimes fairness means giving them what they're used to. Not everything has to be a statement. The meeting drifted forward. Agenda items ticking past. Budget allocations, parent complaints, upcoming events. But every so often, a phrase slipped through that returned like a pebble in her shoe. Keeping things smooth. Not stirring too much. Our image in the community. By the time Harris closed the meeting, Alana felt as though she'd sat through a performance where every line had been coded, every gesture rehearsed. She stood gathering her notepad and slipped out quickly before anyone could corner her with more polished condescension. The hallway was quiet now, lockers gleaming under dimmed lights. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Miss Brooks. The voice startled her. She turned. Near the custodial cart at the end of the hall, Mr. Ellis, the janitor who had always moved quietly, almost invisibly through the school, stood watching her. His hands rested on the mop handle, but his eyes were sharp, steady. He glanced toward the closed conference room door, then back at her. I heard what they said. Alana's heart jumped. She hadn't realized anyone else had been within earshot. Ellis lowered his voice. Be careful. What you're up against here. It's bigger than those kids in your classroom. Alana blinked, caught between relief and dread. What do you mean? He glanced down the hall again. Cautious. I've seen this place chew people up before. Good teachers. Ones who thought they could outwork the bias. But Crestwood has a way of protecting its own. And you're not one of them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The words chilled her. She wanted to ask more, to demand specifics. But Ellis was already pushing his cart forward, his warning hanging in the air like smoke that refused to clear. A quiet janitor, who overheard everything, pulls her aside with a warning that changes everything. Alana stood frozen in the quiet hallway, her mind still replaying Ellis's words. It's bigger than those kids in your classroom. Something in his tone carried a gravity that unsettled her more than the laughter of her students or the barbed comments in the meeting. She had expected open defiance from teenagers, dismissive skepticism from colleagues. But this? A whispered warning from someone who had no reason to intervene. This felt like the first crack in the polished facade of Crestwood. Mr. Ellis, she called softly, quickening her steps to catch up before he disappeared around the corner. He slowed, pushing the mop bucket forward with measured effort. His back was slightly stooped, his uniform faded, but his eyes when they met hers were sharp, alive. Careful, Miss Brooks, he said again, voice low. Walls got ears in this place. She hesitated, then followed him into a side corridor, where the hum of fluorescent lights masked their voices. What did you mean back there? She asked. That it's bigger than the kids? Ellis studied her for a moment, as though deciding whether to open a door he had kept locked for too long. Finally, he leaned against the wall, folding his arms. You think this is new? What happened in your classroom? The jokes they made in that meeting? It's not. I've been here 30 years, and I've seen this school run through good people like water through a sieve. Always the same story. Folks who don't fit, don't last. His words carried the weight of years, heavy and unpolished. Alana swallowed. Teachers of color. Ellis nodded slowly. One after the other. First it's the small stuff. Tone, culture. Too strict, not strict enough. Then come the parents, calls to the office, complaints wrapped in fancy words. Not a good fit, they'll say. And eventually those teachers are gone. Some left on their own, some were pushed out, but they all left. Alana tightened her grip on her notepad. She thought of the delivery bag, the viral video, the whispers in the lounge. Each moment suddenly felt less like an isolated cruelty and more like part of a long-running script. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw you in that classroom, Ellis said. They tried to break you with that stunt, but you didn't give them the satisfaction most would have cracked. You stood there like stone. I've seen teachers older than you, whiter than you crumble faster. You've got something they don't expect. Alana let out a shaky breath. And you think that'll make a difference? Ellis gave a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. I think it makes you dangerous to them. And dangerous people, they either get buried or they change the place. His words landed like a challenge. Alana wanted to believe she was the latter, that she could outlast Crestwood's games. But doubt gnawed at her. What happened to the others? She pressed. Ellis's gaze shifted to the window at the end of the hall, where sunlight filtered through blinds in fractured lines. Miss Taylor taught history. Kids loved her, but parents didn't. They said she brought up race too much. She lasted 1 year. Mr. Daniels, math, got accused of being too aggressive because he raised his voice once. Gone after 3 semesters. Even a counselor, Miss Rivera. She tried to start an equity club. The board shut it down before it got off the ground. She left too. Alana's stomach sank with each name, each story. The weight of tokenism, the idea that she wasn't there as a valued colleague, but as a symbol, a checkbox settled like a stone in her chest. Then why stay? She asked, quietly. Ellis shrugged, his hands resting on the mop handle. Because I know how this place works. My job ain't glamorous, but it's safe. They don't notice the janitor. That's how I've survived here. But teachers, they're in the spotlight. And the spotlight ain't forgiving. For the first time, Alana saw the layers of survival etched into his face. The way he kept his head low, his voice measured, his steps quiet. He had learned the game, and he was warning her it was already in play. Do you think I should leave? She asked, the words tasting bitter even as she said them. Ellis shook his head. That's not my call. But I'll say this. You've got more fire than most. If you can stomach it, you might just turn that fire on them. But you'll have to be smart, real smart. Document everything. Don't let him twist your story before you tell it. Alana nodded slowly. Document everything. The phrase settled in her mind like a strategy, a lifeline. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the lights filling the space between them. Then Ellis leaned closer, lowering his voice. One more thing. Watch who you trust. Some of the people smiling at you in those meetings are the same ones laughing behind your back. Don't give them more ammo. Alana's chest tightened, but she lifted her chin. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Really, I needed to hear this. He gave her a small nod. Just remember, you're walking into a game that was rigged long before you got here. But maybe, just maybe, you can flip the board. The words echoed in her head as she walked back to her classroom that evening. She stayed late, grading papers, drafting lesson plans, scribbling notes of every detail she could remember from the prank and the meeting. For the first time since stepping into Crestwood, she didn't feel completely alone. She had an ally, quiet, hidden, but real. Before leaving, she glanced once more at the spotless whiteboard, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. For a moment, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Maybe she could turn this around. Maybe she could prove them wrong. But the next morning, that fragile hope shattered the moment she unlocked her classroom door. Scrawled across the whiteboard in thick black marker, in letters so large they nearly stretched wall to wall, was a single word: quit. The ink bled into the surface, deliberate and permanent, a message less about mischief and more about power. Alana promises she won't back down, but the next day she discovers a shocking message scrawled across her classroom board. The words still blazed across the whiteboard when Alana stopped in the doorway the next morning. It wasn't just quit anymore. Overnight, someone had returned with a darker, sharper marker and added to it. Now the letters stretched across the board in violent, jagged strokes. Quit. Nah. The slur swallowed the space, its ugliness suffocating. For a heartbeat, Alana couldn't move. Her breath caught in her chest, her hands tightening on the stack of lesson plans she carried. She had been bracing herself for more cruelty, but this was different. This wasn't mischievous or clever. This was raw, deliberate hate. Behind her, a group of students began trickling in. Their voices faltered when they saw the board, and then the laughter started, quiet at first, then rising like an orchestra tuning before a performance. Some tried to hide their smirks behind notebooks. Others took out their phones, quick thumbs capturing the moment before the teacher's reaction. They were waiting for her to explode. They wanted the outburst, the tears, the storm. Alana stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking against the tile. She placed her lesson plans neatly on her desk, refusing to rush. Every movement was deliberate, every breath controlled. She could feel dozens of eyes pressing into her, waiting for her to break. She didn't speak. Instead, she walked calmly to the board, picked up the eraser, and in one measured stroke began to wipe the word away. The sound of felt scraping across the surface echoed through the room. The laughter faltered. One boy muttered under his breath, "She really ain't gonna say nothing." Another whispered, "Wait for it. She's gonna snap." But she didn't. Alana kept erasing, her arms steady, her back straight. With each swipe, the word dissolved into a ghostly smear, then into nothing at all. The silence in the room grew heavier with every second she refused to give them the reaction they craved. When the last trace of the slur disappeared, Alana turned back to face the class. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her stillness spoke louder than any shout. "Take out your journals," she said evenly. "Write one paragraph about what respect means to you. 5 minutes. Start now." The students hesitated. Their arrogance, usually so effortless, cracked under the weight of her composure. A few shuffled in their seats. Some still smirked. But the smirks were thinner now, stretched too tight. Even the ones holding their phones lowered them. Uncertain. One girl, Mara, was already writing. Her pen moved quickly, her face set with quiet determination. Others followed, the sound of scribbling gradually filling the room. Alana walked slowly between the rows, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't say a word about the board, didn't acknowledge the slur, didn't give them what they had planned for. And that silence became its own kind of power. She could feel it shifting, the air in the classroom bending just slightly. For the first time, some of the students weren't laughing. They were uneasy, confused, confronted with the strength they hadn't anticipated. When the 5 minutes ended, Alana returned to the front. "Who wants to share?" she asked. Silence. No volunteers. Her eyes swept the room. Mara cleared her throat. Her voice was soft but steady. "Respect means treating people like they matter, even if you don't understand them." The words hung in the air. Alana nodded. "Good. Anyone else?" No one moved. But the silence wasn't mocking this time. It was heavier, closer to thought. "Then we'll move on," Alana said, shifting seamlessly into the lesson plan. The rest of the period passed without disruption. The students were quieter, not obedient, but not as bold as before. Something had shifted. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. When the bell rang, the class filed out slower than usual. A few lingered near the doorway, watching her. One boy muttered, "She didn't even flinch." Another replied, "Yeah, weird." Weird. That was what they called resilience when they couldn't name it. Alana stayed behind, cleaning the board again, though it was spotless. Her hands trembled only when the room was empty, when the last echoes of footsteps had faded. She set the eraser down and pressed her palms flat against the cool surface, letting the weight of what had just happened wash over her. It hurt. Of course it hurt. The word had pierced her, a reminder of centuries of hate compressed into 6 letters. But she had denied them the victory they wanted. She had taken their weapon and dulled it with silence. Still, humiliation lingered, not because of the slur itself, but because of the laughter, the way children had turned history's ugliest scar into entertainment. That sting didn't fade. It hardened into something sharper, determination. That evening, when the school emptied, and the halls echoed with nothing but the buzz of lights and the hum of distant vents, Alana remained in her classroom. She spread her papers across the desk, her laptop glowing faintly in the dim room. But she wasn't working on lesson plans anymore. She was sketching something bigger. Her pen moved quickly, ideas spilling onto the page, not just activities, but a performance of her own, something unexpected, something that would seize their attention before they could turn it against her. She thought of Ellis's advice: document everything, don't give them ammo. But she also thought of the fire he had named in her, the fire that could be turned outward. This wasn't going to be another ordinary lesson. For the first time since arriving at Crestwood, Ilana smiled, not out of joy, but out of resolve. They thought they had seen her strength when she refused to flinch. They had no idea what she was about to unleash. As she packed her bag, the clock ticked past 7. The hallways deserted except for the faint squeak of Ellis's mop wheels, far down the corridor. She closed her classroom door, the echo sharp in the silence. That night, Ilana stays late preparing something extraordinary for the next class. A plan no one sees coming. The next morning, Ilana entered room 214, earlier than usual. The classroom was still, the air cool with the faint chemical scent of cleaning supplies. She set her bag on the desk, slid her notebook out, and placed a stack of blank index cards in a neat pile. Her heart thudded with both dread and anticipation. She had stayed up half the night preparing not more worksheets, not another lecture, but something else entirely. She knew the students would come in ready for another show. They would be armed with laughter, phones, and whispered codes, convinced they were the directors of this ongoing spectacle. What they didn't know was that today, she was ready to steal the script. By the time second period began, the hallway outside buzzed like a hive. The students filed in, smirks already playing at their mouths. Mara took her usual seat, silent, her eyes flicking between Ilana and the others, as though she sensed what was about to happen. Connor slouched into his chair, his phone sticking out of his pocket like a weapon. Savannah tossed her hair and whispered something sharp enough to make her friends laugh. The tall boy, Tyler Grant, arrived last. He leaned against the doorframe before strolling in, confidence dripping from his every step. His family name, his father's donations, his untouchable arrogance, all of it made him the gravity in the room. Where Tyler went, the others followed. He slid into his chair, kicked it back on 2 legs, and muttered just loud enough for the class to hear, "Round 3. Ilana didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she picked up the stack of index cards. "Today," she said, her tone calm, "we're doing a different kind of exercise. No smartboard, no slides, no phones, just this." She handed each student a card. Some looked amused, others confused. "What's this, like bingo?" Connor muttered. "You'll see," Ilana replied. She waited until every card had been passed out, then stepped back to the front. "On your card, I want you to write the worst word you've ever been called. Not a curse word, not just something silly, something that cut, something that stuck to you. Don't put your name on it, just write the word." The room buzzed with uneasy laughter. Savannah smirked. "This is dramatic." "Do it anyway," Ilana said, her voice firm. For a few moments, pens scratched reluctantly across paper. Some students hesitated, chewing their lips. Others wrote quickly, eager to see where this would go. Ilana gave them 30 seconds, then collected the cards in silence, shuffling them into a stack. "Now," she said, holding the cards high, "I'm going to read some of these out loud." Phones rose, ready to record. Tyler leaned forward, his grin widening. "This ought to be good." Ilana flipped the first card. Her voice stayed even. "Fat." She let the word hang in the air. "Ugly. Worthless. Try hard. Stupid." The laughter began to fade. She read another. "Slut." Her eyes scanned the room. A girl in the back shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossing over her chest. Another. "Weak." A boy near the window clenched his jaw. Another. "Freak." Ilana placed the stack down. The room was quiet now, the students no longer smirking, but staring at their desks, some with furrowed brows, others with eyes narrowed in thought. "These words," she said, her voice steady but sharp, "came from your own hands. They're things you've heard, things that have been used to cut you down. Words don't disappear just because they're said as a joke. They leave marks." She picked up the last card and read it aloud. The silence turned heavy, suffocating. No one laughed. No one moved. "That word," Ilana said, her eyes locking on Tyler's, "is the oldest cut in this country. It has been used for centuries to tell people like me that we don't belong, and when you wrote it on my board yesterday, you thought you were being clever. You thought you were in control." Her voice didn't rise, but her presence filled the room. "But here's the truth. Every time you use a word like this, you tell the world more about you than about me. You show your fear, your ignorance, your weakness. You give me power because I refuse to carry your hate." For 60 seconds she dismantled them. Each word, each pause, each gaze carved into the arrogance that had ruled the room. By the time she set the card down, the class was silent. Phones hung half-forgotten in hands. Savannah's smirk had vanished, replaced by something closer to shame. Connor tapped his desk nervously, as though looking for an escape. Even Mara's eyes were wide, stunned by the force of Alana's composure. It was the first time Crestwood students had been robbed of their laughter. Alana leaned forward, her voice dropping low. So the next time you think about using words as weapons, remember this moment. Remember how quickly your laughter turned to silence. And ask yourself, who's really holding the power here? The bell rang, breaking the spell. Students filed out slowly, their usual swagger replaced with something more uncertain. Mara lingered again, her gaze flicking to Alana as if to say thank you without words. But as the room emptied, one figure remained. Tyler. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, his grin slowly returning. Nice speech, he said, his voice calm, deliberate. But don't think for a second this is over. You might have shut them up for a minute. You won't shut me up. His eyes locked on hers, not mocking but threatening, a challenge carved into his expression. But one powerful student, the ringleader, refuses to back down and sets the stage for a deeper battle. Tyler's grin lingered in Alana's mind long after the students left room. It wasn't the grin of a boy embarrassed or even challenged. It was the grin of someone who knew the game was fixed in his favor. That smile had weight behind it, a confidence she had only seen in people who had never been told no. She discovered just how deep that confidence ran the very next day. The first sign came in whispers. As she walked through the hallway between classes, she caught fragments from students huddled by lockers. Tyler's planning something big. His dad's not happy. She messed with the wrong person. Their tones carried more thrill than fear, as though they were anticipating a spectacle rather than dreading one. By fourth period, she saw the spectacle's first spark. Tyler strolled into class later than usual, sunglasses perched arrogantly on his head, a soda in hand despite the school's ban on food and drinks in classrooms. He didn't glance at her as he entered. Instead, he tossed his bag loudly on the desk, leaned back, and sprawled out as though the room were his stage. Tyler, Alana said evenly, take off the sunglasses and put the drink away. He tilted his head toward her, that slow smile sliding back into place. Oh, this. Sorry, Miss Brooks. Must have missed that in the student handbook. He made no move to comply. Eyes darted across the room. Students waiting, measuring. Alana felt the tension coil. This wasn't about soda or sunglasses. It was about power. Put it away, she repeated, her voice calm but sharp. Tyler sighed dramatically, then finally lowered his sunglasses. But instead of discarding the soda, he placed it deliberately on her desk, inches from her lesson plan. Better? The class erupted in snickers. Alana didn't flinch. She slid the can aside and said, open your books. She refused to give him the drama he wanted. But Tyler wasn't finished. Throughout the lesson he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for those around him to hear. This class is a joke. She's obsessed with power. I could teach this better. Each line was calculated, subtle enough to avoid direct confrontation, sharp enough to cut. At dismissal, as students filed out, Tyler lingered again. He leaned close to her desk, his tone lower now. You really think you can win here? His eyes sparkled with something darker than mischief. You're playing in our house. That word "our" rang in her ears, long after he left. Later that afternoon, as she sat in the staff lounge, the whispers shifted from students to colleagues. She overheard two teachers near the coffee machine. Tyler Grant's been acting up again, one said. Well, you know how it is, the other replied. As long as his family keeps writing checks, the school looks the other way. Alana froze. Checks. Donations. Influence. Suddenly Tyler's arrogance made sense. He wasn't just a class clown. He was protected. Shielded by money. By legacy. By the kind of privilege that turned misconduct into mere antics. Her phone buzzed on the table. A new email from Principal Harris. Reminder. Address classroom disruptions with professionalism. Remember, certain students require a careful approach. Certain students. The message between the lines was clear. Tyler. At evening, Alana sat in her apartment, her lesson plans spread across the table, but her focus shattered. She thought of Ellis's warning. It's bigger than those kids. He had been right. Tyler wasn't just a student pushing boundaries. He was the face of a system designed to protect him at all costs. The next day, the escalation arrived. When Alana entered room 214, the students were already buzzing. Tyler sat at his desk, A smug expression plastered across his face. On the whiteboard, written in perfect block letters, was a new phrase: Brooksy is babysitter. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, too careful to be random graffiti. A few students laughed openly. Others filmed quietly. Alana erased it without a word, just as she had with the slur before. But this time, the silence she commanded didn't last. Tyler leaned back in his chair and said loudly, "Don't worry, class. Babysitters get paid extra for putting up with bad kids. Maybe we should all chip in for Miss Brooks." Laughter erupted, sharper this time. The word babysitter ricocheted around the room. "Babysitter," someone repeated. "Better than teacher," another chimed. Alana's chest tightened, but she stayed composed. She turned to Tyler. "Do you feel proud of this?" He smirked. "Just calling it like we see it. Don't take it personal. Miss Brooks, it's just a joke." That phrase again. Just a joke. After class, Mara lingered, her face pale. "He's planning something worse," she whispered. "He told people at lunch. He said his dad's gonna fix it." Alana frowned. "Fix what?" Mara shook her head. "I don't know, but he said you'd regret crossing him." Alana's stomach dropped. She thought back to Harris's careful warnings, to the teacher's whispers, to Ellis's advice. She was no longer just dealing with bullying in the classroom. She was facing an enemy shielded by wealth, influence, and fear, and she had no idea how far they would go. The following morning, her fear took shape. As she arrived at school, she noticed a sleek black car parked near the entrance, its polished exterior gleaming under the morning sun. A man stood beside it, tall, confident, dressed in a tailored suit. His resemblance to Tyler was unmistakable. She climbed the steps to the entrance, her heartbeat quickening. The man's eyes tracked her every step. When she reached the doors, he stepped forward, his smile tight and cold. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice dripping with entitlement. "Do you know who we are?" Tyler's father arrives at school, and his first words to Alana drip with entitlement. "Do you know who we are?" Alana stood frozen on the school steps, her eyes locked on the man blocking her path. Tyler's father didn't move aside. His frame was broad, his suit crisp, his confidence sharpened to a blade's edge. "Do you know who we are?" he repeated, his voice calm but filled with a quiet threat. Alana's pulse quickened. She had no illusions about what he meant. This wasn't about his name, his family, or even his son. It was about power, who had it, and who did. "Yes," Alana said evenly. "You're Mr. Grant." Tyler's father. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Correct. And Tyler tells me you've been overstepping. Embarrassing him. Singling him out." Alana's voice stayed firm. "I hold all my students to the same standard. Tyler is no different." Mr. Grant's gaze hardened. "He is different. He's a Grant. My family has supported this school for decades. The gym you walk past every morning, that's ours. The library wing, ours too. You're standing on bricks my money laid down. So when my son says a teacher is making his life difficult, you'd better believe I'll protect him." Alana tightened her jaw. She wanted to respond, to remind him that classrooms weren't for sale, that respect couldn't be bought. But before she could speak, Principal Harris appeared at the doors, his smile polite and strained. "Mr. Grant," Harris said smoothly. "So good to see you. Let's step into my office." His eyes flicked to Alana briefly, sharp with warning. "Miss Brooks, I'll speak with you later." The two men disappeared inside, leaving Alana standing on the steps, the weight of Mr. Grant's words pressing down on her. That afternoon, the fallout began. In Harris's office, Alana sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his voice measured. "Ms. Brooks, I want to be clear. We value diversity here. We value strong educators. But Crestwood also values harmony. And right now there are concerns." "Concerns?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Your approach," Harris replied. "Some parents feel your style is too strict, too confrontational. I've received emails." Alana blinked. "Emails from whom?" Harris didn't answer directly. "Parents talk. Word spreads. We can't afford disruption to the school's reputation." Alana's heart sank. Reputation. That was the word that mattered here. Not truth, not equity, not respect. Reputation. "So you want me to ignore Tyler's behavior?" she asked. "I want you to de-escalate," Harris said. "Don't make yourself the story. Sometimes, letting things go is better for everyone. His words stung. Not because she hadn't expected them, but because of the way he dressed them up as professionalism when they were really about survival. When she left his office, the shift in the staff room was palpable. Conversations that once paused when she entered, now barely acknowledged her at all. Teachers who had once exchanged polite smiles, now avoided eye contact. Some offered shallow pleasantries, their voices too bright, their words too empty. Mrs. Carmichael's smile was the worst of all, wide, sugary, and distant. "Keep your chin up, dear," she said, as Alana passed. "You'll find your rhythm if you just relax a little." Relax, lighten up, de-escalate. Each word was a chain, links tightening around her. In the days that followed, she felt the whispers grow. In the hallways, students carried Tyler's arrogance like armor. In the parking lot, she overheard two parents speaking in hushed voices. "She's not like the other teachers," one said. "She doesn't get Crestwood," the other replied. "She won't last long." Everywhere she turned, the walls seemed to close in tighter. Her classroom was no longer just a room with desks and books. It was a battlefield, and every smile, every whisper, every silence carried weight. By the end of the week, exhaustion clung to her. She sat alone in her apartment on Friday night, papers spread before her, resignation whispering at the edge of her thoughts. Would it really be so bad to walk away? To leave this hostile place behind and find somewhere her work was valued? She closed her eyes, her fingers pressing against her temples. And then, unbidden, a memory surfaced. She was 12 years old again, sitting in her grandmother's small living room. The air smelled of lavender and old books. Her grandmother's hands, worn and strong, rested on hers as she spoke. "Baby, the world will try to tell you you're too much, too loud, too proud, too strong. They'll tell you to shrink so they can stay comfortable. But don't you ever, you hear me? Don't you ever." Alana had nodded back then, not fully understanding. But now, sitting in her apartment decades later, the words lit something inside her chest, a spark she thought she had lost. She wasn't here to be comfortable. She was here to teach, to fight for her students, even the ones who mocked her, to stand for herself, even when the ground shook beneath her. Slowly, she opened her laptop. She began typing, her fingers moving faster with each word. It wasn't a resignation letter. It was something else, something she hadn't fully decided yet, but each keystroke carried her grandmother's voice, each sentence building into something that wasn't surrender but defiance. When she finished the first draft, she sat back, her chest heaving, her hands trembling, the glow of the screen reflected in her eyes. It wasn't the letter anyone expected her to write. That night, she drafts a letter, but not the kind anyone expects. The glow of the laptop screen lingered in Alana's eyes long after she closed it. The letter she had typed wasn't a resignation, and it wasn't an accusation either. It was something in between, an outline, a record, the beginning of what would become her quiet weapon. By Monday morning, she walked into Crestwood with a different kind of resolve. Not the fiery determination that had pushed her to erase slurs from her board, not the steel that had carried her through Tyler's taunts. This was colder, sharper, quiet. She would no longer give them the fight they were baiting her into. She would not yell, or plead, or even confront. Instead, she would watch, record, and collect. The strategy of silence had begun. In her classroom desk drawer, she placed a small spiral notebook. She opened to the first page and wrote the date, then recorded the slur she had erased, the babysitter graffiti, the chicken and watermelon delivery, and each coded insult that had followed. She added times, names when she could, descriptions of tone and reactions. It felt mechanical at first, like scribbling down ghosts, but with each entry, the pile grew heavier, more undeniable. She didn't stop there. After every staff meeting, she wrote down the phrases that had been tossed so casually at her. "Lighten up, too urban. Not a good fit. Parents concerned." She noted who had said what, who had laughed, who had stayed silent. She saved every email, every group chat screenshot that accidentally made its way to her phone. At night, her apartment filled with folders, digital and paper, labeled meticulously: student incidents, staff comments, parent rumors, administration warnings. It wasn't glamorous and it didn't feel like a victory, but it was something tangible, something no denial could erase. Days stretched into weeks, and her silence became its own shield. Students continued their antics, but instead of lashing out, she wrote them down. Connor's whispered, extra. Savannah's staged cough of ghetto. Tyler's daily mutterings about our house. She didn't react. She didn't argue. She simply logged it. The students grew restless with her lack of reaction. Their laughter felt forced now. Their pranks more desperate. Phones still hovered, waiting for the explosion that never came. Tyler sneered one afternoon. Guess we broke her. But beneath his words was a flicker of irritation. She hadn't broken. She was waiting. Teachers noticed too. Mrs. Carmichael passed her in the lounge, with a smile too sweet, her tone laced with warning. Quiet is good, dear. Quiet makes people forget. Alana returned the smile, saying nothing. She wrote it down that night. Even Principal Harris grew cautious. After another concerned parent email, he called her into his office. You're doing well keeping things calm, he said. We just need to ensure nothing escalates. She nodded, hiding the notebook beneath her arm when she left. She would record his words too. But silence didn't mean surrender. Quietly, Alana was building a case that no one could dismiss. She wasn't just fighting for her dignity anymore. She was archiving the system's rot. Still, the cost weighed on her. Each day felt like walking through a storm with an umbrella made of glass. Strong enough to shield her for now, fragile enough to shatter at the wrong touch. Her chest ached with the restraint it took to hold back, to swallow the hurt in real time and save it for the page. Some nights she sat at her desk, her grandmother's words echoing. Don't you ever shrink. And she wondered if this silence was shrinking, or if it was the only way to prepare for the explosion she was planning. Then came the twist. It was late on a Thursday, the halls nearly empty, when she stayed after school to grade essays. The clock ticked softly, the glow of her desk lamp casting shadows against the whiteboard. She was mid-sentence in her notes when she heard it. The faint shuffle of paper sliding under her door. Her head snapped up. The hallway outside was quiet. She rose, crossed the room, and found an envelope resting just inside the threshold. No name, no markings, just a plain manila envelope, sealed tight. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried it back to her desk. She hesitated, staring at it. A warning? A threat? Another cruel prank? She broke the seal. Inside were photocopies, pages of emails, memos, and internal correspondence. She skimmed the first sheet and felt her breath catch. It was a message chain between Principal Harris and the school board chair. The subject, Staff Diversity Initiative. The language was damning. Phrases leapt off the page. Symbolic hire, optics matter more than performance. Not a long-term fit. Her name appeared more than once, couched in careful euphemisms that stripped her of humanity and reduced her to strategy. She turned the pages faster. Another email. Discussions of donors, concerns about ruffling parents' feathers, explicit instructions to handle her if she caused waves, and one line, buried in the middle of a thread, that made her skin crawl. We knew this risk when we brought her on. She wasn't meant to last. Alana dropped the pages on the desk, her heart hammering. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just whispers. It was deliberate, planned. She wasn't paranoid. The system really was rigged, and here was proof in black and white. She scanned the envelope again, searching for a clue to its sender. Nothing. No note, no signature, just the evidence, left in her hands. Her silence had been strategy. But now she had something more. Ammunition. She leaned back in her chair, the copies spread across her desk like pieces of a puzzle. Whoever had slipped this to her knew the stakes, knew she would understand. The question now was clear. What would she do with it? She receives an anonymous envelope slipped under her classroom door. Inside is proof that could destroy the administration's credibility. The manila envelope lay hidden in the bottom drawer of Alana's desk like a live wire, humming with potential. Every morning she unlocked the drawer, saw the corner of it beneath her papers, and locked it again. She wasn't ready, not yet. She needed to be sure. She needed the right moment. But Tyler wasn't waiting. The whispers about her had multiplied in the halls. Babysitter Brooks. Some students called when they thought she couldn't hear. Others coughed racial caricatures under their breath, the kind that sounded like inside jokes but cut like knives. Mara walked past her one morning and murmured, "He's planning something. He told people to watch out this Friday." Friday came like a storm. By second period, Alana felt a difference in the air. Students filed into room 214, with a buzz too loud, too eager, like the audience before a play. Tyler entered last, as always, his swagger undeniable, his smirk carved into his face. He dropped his bag on the desk with a loud thud and leaned back. "Good morning, Miss Brooks," he said, the false sweetness in his voice sending ripples of laughter across the room. Alana ignored him. She began her lesson, projecting a passage from To Kill a Mockingbird onto the smartboard. Irony she hadn't planned, but now couldn't escape. The theme was empathy, perspective, walking in another person's shoes. She spoke steadily, her voice calm, but the students weren't listening. Halfway through the discussion, a sound erupted from the hallway, music blaring and distorted. The bass shook the walls. Confused murmurs spread through the classroom until, suddenly, the smartboard flickered. The projection shifted from the text she had prepared to a video feed. At first, she thought it was another hack, like before, but then she saw it. A pre-recorded video, spliced together with cruel precision, clips of her classroom, stolen from the hidden media camera, cut into mocking montages. The chicken and watermelon delivery, her erasing the slur, her holding the stack of index cards during the worst word exercise. Over it all, Tyler's voice narrated in a low, mocking drawl. "Welcome to Remedial English featuring Miss Brooks, the diversity hire of the year. Watch as she struggles to survive in a school where no one wants her." Laughter erupted. Phones shot into the air, recording, spreading it instantly. The video continued. "She says respect is earned, but maybe she should earn a new job. She says words have power, so let's give her a word. Babysitter. Babysitter." The chant caught fire. First a few voices, then more. Soon half the class was pounding their desks, chanting in rhythm. "Babysitter. Babysitter." Alana froze at the front of the room, her hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly her knuckles went white. She wanted to shout, to silence them, to demand Harris walk into the room and see what his beloved donor's son had orchestrated. But she didn't. She couldn't. Her throat tightened until thereing felt like a task. In the corner of her eye she saw Mara sitting rigid, her pen clenched in her hand. She wasn't chanting. She wasn't laughing. But she also wasn't speaking. And that was the worst part. No one spoke. Not the handful of students who knew this had gone too far. Not the ones who sat frozen, unsure. Silence was complicity, and the silence roared louder than the chants. The video ended with a still frame of Alana's face mid-sentence, her mouth open, her expression twisted, not with anger, but caught at the wrong second, made grotesque. Over it, bold white letters read, "Quit bro." The screen went black. The chant died, and then, laughter again, louder than before. Alana turned to the board, her vision blurring. She erased the screen with a trembling hand, her body stiff. "Open your books," she managed, her voice cracked. A fresh wave of laughter. She pushed through the lesson. Every minute in eternity. Not one word she spoke landed. Not one pair of eyes looked at the text. Phones glowed under desks, spreading clips, memes, hashtags. When the bell rang, the students filed out, their laughter trailing into the hall. Tyler lingered. As always, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You won't last another week," he whispered. "And when you're gone, nobody will even remember your name." Then he left, leaving her alone in the wreckage. Alana sank into her chair, the silence deafening. Her chest burned, her throat ached, her hands shook. She had survived the slur, the pranks, the whispers. But this public humiliation, orchestrated with such precision, sanctioned by silence, this was the breaking point. She thought of her grandmother's words, of Ellis's warnings, of Harris's smirk when he said, "Prove yourself." And for the first time she felt utterly defeated. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe she couldn't win. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She buried her face in her hands and sat like that for a long time, until the shadows in the classroom lengthened, and the sun dipped behind the football field outside. When she finally lifted her head, her gaze fell to the bottom drawer of her desk. The envelope. Her breath hitched. She pulled it out, spread the copies across her desk, and read them again. Symbolic hire, not meant to last. Optics matter more than performance. Each phrase cut, but this time, the cuts didn't wound, they fueled. They thought they had buried her. They thought this was the end. But in her hands she held the power to flip the entire school upside down. But then she remembers the envelope, and realizes she holds the power to flip the entire school upside down. The envelope sat heavy in Alana's bag all weekend. Like a second heartbeat she couldn't silence. Every time she reached for her wallet or planner, her fingers brushed its edge, and her chest tightened. She read the documents again and again, until the words etched themselves into her memory. Symbolic hire, not meant to last, handle her carefully. Each phrase became both dagger and shield. By Monday morning she knew she couldn't keep it hidden any longer. The breaking point had already come and gone. Tyler's video, the chants, the hashtags, it had spread beyond Crestwood's walls. Parents were whispering. Teachers were smirking behind coffee cups. And Harris's silence confirmed what she already knew. The administration would protect its golden boy and sacrifice her. She wouldn't wait to be sacrificed. She would act. That week, the school board convened for its monthly meeting. Usually those gatherings were sleepy affairs. Budget reports, upcoming events, brief mentions of parent concerns. But not this time. Word had spread that Ms. Brooks planned to speak. Parents filled the rows, murmuring. Students lingered in clusters, some with curiosity, others with phones ready. Teachers stood along the walls, their faces masks of politeness, though Alana could see the nerves beneath. When her name was called, she rose from her seat, heart pounding. She carried a thick binder in her arms, the envelope tucked neatly inside. As she walked to the podium, the room seemed to shrink. Every eye was on her. "Ms. Brooks," the board chair said, her tone cool, "you have 5 minutes." Alana adjusted the microphone. Her voice trembled on the first word, but steadied with the second. "I came to Crestwood to teach, to help students find their voices. But what I've faced here isn't just disrespect. It's a pattern, a system designed to silence teachers like me." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Alana opened her binder. "I've kept records," she continued. "Every prank, every slur, every time administration told me to lighten up or de-escalate. I've logged parent whispers, staff room jokes, and the way students learned that certain kids, certain families would always be untouchable." She held up a page, the text highlighted and dated. "Here, an email from administration reminding me to prove myself more than anyone else. Here, notes from a meeting where colleagues called my tone too urban. Here, screenshots of a group chat where staff laughed at my humiliation." The room stirred. Teachers shifted uneasily. Parents exchanged glances. Students lowered their phones. "And then," Alana said, her voice sharpening, "there's this." She pulled the photocopies from the envelope and held them high. The pages trembled slightly in her hand, but her gaze never wavered. Internal emails. Between the principal and members of this board. Emails that describe me not as a teacher, not as a professional, but as a symbolic hire. Emails that admit I was never expected to last. A gasp rippled through the room. These words, symbolic, optics, not a long-term fit, are not slips of the tongue. They're proof that this school's culture of racism and favoritism comes from the top. And when that culture trickles down, you get students who feel empowered to deliver fried chicken and watermelon to a black teacher's door. You get slurs written across boards. You get chants of babysitter shouted in classrooms while cameras roll and no one stops it. Her voice rose, filling the room. "This isn't just about me. It's about every teacher who left before me. Every student who was silenced. Every person who walked these halls and was told they didn't belong because of who they were. This is about a system that shields bullies and punishes those who stand against them." The silence that followed was electric. Parents shifted in their seats, some red-faced, others pale. Students who had once laughed at her stared at their laps, their smirks gone. Teachers whispered, uncomfortable. A woman in the back, a parent Alana didn't recognize, stood. "Is this true?" she demanded, looking at the board members. "Did you really say those things?" The chair cleared her throat. "These documents will need to be authenticated." "Authenticated?" Alana interrupted, her voice cutting sharp. "I didn't forge them. They were handed to me anonymously, because someone inside this system knew the truth. And you know what? It doesn't matter who sent them. What matters is that they exist, that they confirm what too many of us already knew. This school protects the powerful and sacrifices everyone else." Murmurs rose into shouts. Parents demanded answers. Students exchanged wide-eyed looks. Teachers stared straight ahead, as if by not reacting, they could vanish. For the first time, Alana saw cracks in the board's composure. Harris's face was tight. His jaw clenched. The chair shuffled papers unnecessarily, her fingers trembling. Even Mr. Ralston, sitting off to the side, avoided her gaze. It was working. The truth was out, raw and undeniable. Then from the back of the room, a voice sliced through the noise. Enough. Every head turned. Mr. Grant stepped forward, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression cold and unflinching. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need it. His voice carried on its own. "This is nothing but a witch hunt," he said, his eyes locked on Alana. "A bitter teacher trying to save face because she can't handle Crestwood. You think we don't see what this is? You're trying to tear down a school with lies." "They're not lies," Alana shot back. "They're your system's own words." Grant smiled thinly. "Words on a page mean nothing without context. And if you continue down this road, Miss Brooks, my family will file a lawsuit so large you won't be able to teach anywhere ever again. Do you really want to risk that?" The room went still. Parents who had just moments ago looked outraged, now shifted uncomfortably. Teachers' eyes darted away. Students whispered nervously. The threat hung heavy, poisoning the air. Alana gripped the edge of the podium, her pulse pounding. For a moment the weight of his words pressed down, crushing the fragile momentum she had built. Lawsuit, career, future. It was the kind of threat Crestwood's power wielded best, not just intimidation, but erasure. Just as the board begins to take her side, Tyler's father threatens a lawsuit that could bury everything. The boardroom air was thick, suffocating. Mr. Grant's words lingered like smoke. "We'll bury you in lawsuits." Alana stood at the podium, her binder of evidence before her, her chest rising and falling as she tried to steady her breath. For a moment she thought the momentum she had built was gone, crushed beneath the weight of his wealth and entitlement. Parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if his threat had reminded them of their own fragility. Teachers stared at the floor. Even the board members, faces that had begun to soften toward her moments before, looked hesitant now, calculating risk instead of justice. For the first time that night, Alana felt her knees weaken. Maybe this was it. Maybe she had come all this way just to be silenced again, not by laughter this time, but by the cold machinery of power. Then a voice rose from the back. "Actually, she's telling the truth." Heads turned. A woman stood, her back straight, her face lined with age but steady with conviction. She wore a plain navy dress and carried a leather satchel slung across her shoulder. Her presence was quiet, unassuming, yet it silenced the room more effectively than Mr. Grant's threats. Alana blinked. She didn't recognize her. The woman stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum floor. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I taught history at Crestwood for 12 years, until they forced me out." Gasps spread across the audience. Some teachers whispered. Alana's pulse quickened. Ellis had told her once about a Miss Taylor who hadn't lasted. She was real, and she was here. "I was given the same speech Miss Brooks has described," Margaret continued, her voice unwavering. "The same coded warnings, the same condescension dressed as advice. Parents complained. I was too focused on race, too strict, too unwilling to play along. And when I spoke up, they told me to consider other opportunities. I resigned before they could ruin me." The board chair shifted in her seat. "Miss Taylor, this meeting is for current staff and parents." But Margaret raised her hand. "You don't get to silence me again. Not after what you did." She opened her satchel and pulled out a folder. "Because I kept records too. Every email, every memo, every dismissal." She laid copies on the table before the board members. "Read them. They're almost word for word what Miss Brooks has in her hands. Different year. Same story. You've been running the same playbook for decades." Murmurs surged louder now. Parents leaned forward, trying to glimpse the pages. Teachers whispered fiercely among themselves. Students pulled out phones, recording every second. Alana's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't dared to imagine someone would step out of the shadows and confirm what she'd been saying. It was as though the ghost Ellis had warned her about had come to life, standing before everyone, no longer silent. Mr. Grant scoffed, though his voice wavered slightly. "This is irrelevant. She's a bitter former employee." "Bitter?" Margaret's voice cut like glass. "No, I was broken. For years I carried the shame of leaving, thinking maybe I wasn't enough. But watching this young woman stand here tonight, I realized it wasn't me. It was you. All of you. This school breaks the people it doesn't want, and now the pattern is undeniable." The silence that followed was different this time. Not hesitant, not fearful. It was recognition, the kind of silence that comes when denial becomes impossible. The board chair cleared her throat, her hands trembling as she shuffled the new documents. We will need time to review this. No, Margaret said firmly. You've had time, years of it. You don't need more review. You need accountability. Her words hit the room like a hammer. The board whispered among themselves, papers passing quickly from one to another. The audience leaned forward, tension building, waiting. Finally, the chair looked up, her expression strained. Effective immediately, she said, her voice carrying through the room. Principal Harris is suspended pending investigation. Gasps again. This time sharper, louder. Teachers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Parents muttered. Students craned their necks. Alana stood frozen at the podium, her mind reeling. Suspended. For the first time, the armor of privilege had cracked. The system had bent under the weight of truth. But even as relief washed through her, another fear crept in. Because Harris wasn't the only one who had whispered warnings, smirked through meetings, turned a blind eye. The culture of Crestwood was larger than one man. And if the board was willing to suspend him, what would they do with her? As the chair banged her gavel to restore order, she fixed her gaze on Alana. This investigation will be thorough, and while it proceeds, your position here, Miss Brooks. She paused, the hesitation heavy, will also be under review. Alana's chest tightened. The room around her blurred, voices rising, parents shouting, phones recording. For every person cheering the exposure, another seemed eager to see her gone too. She had brought the truth into the light. But would she survive it? The board suspends the principal, but will Alana's job survive the fallout? The days after the board meeting were a blur of headlines, whispers, and watchful silence. Crestwood High, once a fortress of polished reputation, was suddenly under siege. News outlets picked up the story, first local, then state-level blogs. Words like systemic racism, favoritism, and toxic culture were splashed across articles that had once only celebrated Crestwood's championships and college acceptance rates. For the first time, parents weren't whispering behind closed doors. They were demanding answers. Some packed the district office with picket signs, "We stand with Brooks." Others stormed the board with angry emails, insisting that Crestwood's good name was being dragged through the mud. The town was split, the school at its epicenter. And Tyler was no longer untouchable. His suspension was announced 3 days later. The statement was brief, couched in neutral terms. Due to a series of ongoing investigations into student conduct, Tyler Grant will be suspended pending further review. The words were vague, but everyone knew the truth. The golden boy had fallen. Students buzzed in hallways, their voices hushed but tinged with awe. Did you hear? Tyler's out. Grant money couldn't save him this time. Some sounded triumphant, others unsettled. A few whispered that Alana was the reason, that she had toppled the Grants. For Alana, the shift was surreal. Walking through the halls, she felt eyes on her constantly, but not with the smirks or sneers she had grown used to. Now there were nods, small, awkward smiles. One student even held a door open for her, muttering, "Thanks for, not giving up." It was respect, but the fragile, tentative kind. The kind that came not from admiration, but from fear of what truth could do when it was finally spoken. Still, the scars ran deep. In the staff lounge, conversations quieted when she entered. Teachers who had once joined in subtle mockery now avoided her. Their silence not solidarity but self-preservation. Mrs. Carmichael no longer offered her syrupy smiles. She simply looked through her as though Alana had become both untouchable and dangerous. Even some parents were relentless. Alana overheard 2 of them outside during dismissal. "She thinks she's a hero," one said, voice sharp. "She's a troublemaker," the other hissed. "She's going to ruin this school." The words cut, but they didn't wound her as deeply as before. Because for every parent who vilified her, there was another who quietly pressed her hand after meetings, saying, "My child needed someone like you." For every student who avoided her eyes, another wrote "thank you" in the margins of an essay. Her classroom became both a sanctuary and a reminder. Students sat straighter now. Phones weren't brandished so quickly. Jokes didn't linger in the air the way they used to. Mara, once timid, now volunteered answers with confidence. Even Connor offered tentative participation, though his voice still carried hesitation. Yet the memories haunted Alana. At night, she still saw the words scrawled across her board, heard the echo of chants pounding in rhythm. "Babysitter, babysitter." She still felt the sting of Harris's warning emails. the weight of laughter disguised as just a joke. Justice had come, but at a cost. The investigation spread wider, pulling in names she had once thought untouchable. Emails surfaced. Donor relationships were scrutinized. Harris remained suspended, his reputation unraveling thread by thread. The school board scrambled to distance themselves, offering hollow statements about commitment to equity. Alana became a symbol. Newspapers called her the teacher who wouldn't back down. Social media carried her story far beyond Crestwood. Strangers sent messages of support, but also hate. She received both handwritten letters of gratitude and anonymous threats in her mailbox. She had wanted to teach literature. Instead, she had become a case study in survival. Ellis found her one afternoon, still pushing his cart down the hallway. He paused, leaning on the mop handle, his eyes weary but proud. "You shook the walls," he said quietly. Alana nodded, her throat tight. "And now I'm wondering if they'll rebuild them with me inside, or without me." Ellis gave a small knowing smile. "Doesn't matter, you left cracks. Cracks let light in." She carried his words with her into the evenings, when the weight of it all pressed too heavy on her chest. Cracks let light in. And then one night, long after the last bell, she stayed late, to grade essays. The building was quiet, the hum of the vents her only company. She set down her red pen, rubbed her temples, and looked up at the board. Her breath caught. Across the board, written in clear, bold strokes, were words again. For a split second, panic shot through her chest, old wounds tearing open. She braced herself for another slur, another cruel punch disguised as a joke. But this time, it wasn't hate. "Thank you, Miss Brooks." The letters were uneven, layered over one another, as though several students had written them together, each adding to the message. Her throat tightened, her hands trembling as she reached for the eraser, and then stopped. She didn't erase it. She couldn't. For the first time since she had walked into Crestwood, the board carried not mockery, but gratitude. Alone in her classroom, she sees something written on the board again. But this time it isn't hate. The Monday after the board's decision, the school felt different. The hallways still gleamed. The trophy cases still boasted their victories, and the banners of Crestwood's pride still hung high. But the silence was heavier, more watchful. Every step Alana took through the building was met with eyes that flickered away quickly, whispers that stopped just short of her ears. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was undeniable. News of the suspension had spread fast. Harris's name, once uttered with reverence, now carried a shadow. Some teachers walked with their shoulders hunched lower, nervous about what the investigation might uncover. Others wore carefully blank expressions, as though neutrality might save them from the fallout. Parents had begun sending emails, half concerned, half demanding reassurance that Crestwood's reputation wouldn't collapse. And yet, for the first time since her first day, Alana didn't feel cornered. She felt steady. The truth was out, and while the fight was far from over, she was still here. That morning, when she unlocked room 214, she froze. On the whiteboard, written in large looping letters, was a message. "Thank you, Miss Brooks." No slur, no mockery, no cruel joke, just those words, stark and unadorned. She stepped closer, her fingers grazing the board as if testing its reality. The handwriting wasn't neat. It looked like several different students had written it together, some letters jagged, others curved, overlapping as though they had passed the marker around. Her chest tightened. It wasn't an apology for everything that had been done. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. When the students filed in, their energy was subdued, uncertain. Phones weren't held aloft like weapons. Whispers came, but softer, less sharp. Murrah sat down and gave Alana a small, tentative smile. Even Connor, who had once muttered jokes under his breath, kept his head lowered, his notebook open before the bell rang. Only Tyler kept his grin, though it was tighter now, forced. He slouched in his chair, but his eyes darted to the message on the board, and for the first time, Alana saw flickers of unease behind the bravado. She turned to the class. "Respect isn't demanded," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's taught, and I intend to keep teaching it, whether you're ready for it or not." The room was silent, but it wasn't the silence of mockery anymore. It was the silence of something shifting, something breaking open. Throughout the day, word spread about the message on her board. Teachers glanced into room 214 as they passed. Their expressions conflicted, some approving, others wary, as though gratitude itself was a form of rebellion. By lunchtime, students who had never spoken to her nodded politely in the hall. A freshman girl slipped her a folded note that simply read, "You made me feel like I mattered." But with gratitude came backlash. That afternoon, Alana overheard two parents in the parking lot. "They're making her into some kind of hero," one scoffed. "It's ridiculous," the other replied. "She embarrassed the whole school. She should have been fired." The words stung, but they didn't crush her. Not anymore. Because for every voice that tried to erase her, another voice now rose to echo her name. That evening, Alana stayed late, straightening desks, grading essays. She paused when she saw Mara at the door. "Ms. Brooks?" Mara asked softly. "Did you see the board this morning?" Alana nodded. "I did." Mara shifted, her hands gripping her backpack straps. "It wasn't just me. A few of us stayed after practice yesterday. We wanted you to know not everyone's against you. Not everyone was laughing." Emotion welled in Alana's chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you, Mara. That means more than you know." Mara hesitated. "Even Tyler, he didn't stop us. He just walked away." Alana raised her brows slightly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't transformation. But maybe even in Tyler, there was a crack in the armor. When Mara left, Alana turned back to the board, the words still faintly visible under the eraser line. "Thank you, Miss Brooks." She stood there for a long moment, remembering her very first day, the chalk dust, the laughter, the sting of humiliation, how they had tried to break her before she even spoke. And now, weeks later, that same board carried a message that no one could have predicted. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Don't you ever shrink." And Alana realized she hadn't. They had tried to make her small, to erase her, to bury her under silence and shame. But instead she had taken their cruelty and turned it into a lesson they would never forget. The next morning, as students filed in, she stood at the front of the room, steady and unbroken. "Open your books," she said. "Today we're going to talk about cycles, how they continue, and how they can be broken." The words landed heavier than the text itself. Students listened, really listened. And when the camera of the mind pulls back, the final image lingers. Alana standing tall in front of the board, her eyes steady, her presence unshaken. The scars were there, no doubt, but so was the fire. They tried to break her, but in 60 seconds she broke the cycle. And maybe that's the question we're all left with. When cruelty hides behind laughter, and silence protects the powerful, will we choose to look away, or to stand up? If her fight moved you, type yes. If you believe in justice, and subscribe if her story broke your heart.